Welcome back in, everybody. This is part two of our draft prep specials. We're getting you ready for your fantasy football draft, which is right around the corner or going on now. Hopefully, you're not going on now. There's lots of ACLs to tear in the next 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, not that I'm rooting for that. I see you smirk at me. But the Fantasy Football Podcast is here for you, my dear friends. And tonight we're going to be talking about running backs. I can tell you that I'm obsessed with running backs in my fantasy football teams. I want 15 of them. My entire roster would be running backs if I could do it. That's how I win leagues. So this is a very important show for me. Frowny face Greg over here. I'm Shane Peterson, with me Greg Bright. Greg,
I'm
what's
just
up, man?
wondering how many leagues you've actually won, compared to how many you've played in.
I've
You
won
know.
a lot of leagues. You remember that I think when you were sick once, I had Alan filling in, and he started talking about how I was such a big winner, and I was like, this is too far. Um,
He was
I mean,
a
but keep
plant.
keep
You planted him.
keep going, but stop at the
Hmm.
same time.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't even know. Go ahead, keep going.
Throw you off course with all that.
You did.
So the sort of the state of the running back position, usually so why I think it's not abnormal. We're not special, right? I'm not special by saying that the running back position is hugely important. An elite running back is a serious game changer, and being able to have a couple of running backs you can rely on can make a huge difference in your team. There's other ways you can go, but the majority of rosters are constructed with a couple of elite starting running backs. And this year, looking at this crop of running backs, my sense is that it's that the quality running backs are deeper than usual, and then it falls off very quickly, and you get into some pretty sketchy space. We talked in a previous episode about sort of this desert. There's like a 20-30 pick gap or something somewhere in here, where there's really not somebody that most people are super excited about from a running back perspective. But usually your top 15, 20 picks are chock full of running backs. So, we're gonna start there and kind of move from there. Is this do you kind of agree with that assessment, Greg, for running backs this year?
I do agree with how you've assessed the QB depth. I'm sorry, RB depth, and kind of that desert that we spoke about before, as far as the top tiers versus the lower tiers. I will say, you started out the podcast by talking about how important the position is. I do agree that the running back position is important, obviously, but I'm not so quick to always say I must take three running backs in my first three rounds, for example. I I tended to stray from your strategy a little bit in that I'm much more flexible to go anchor running back, for example, and say, okay, I've got my Derrick Henry. I'm now not taking a running back until like the sixth or seventh round again. So I'm a little more flexible. It just depends on who's going around me, who I see available at my next pick, etc. And so I'm not so quick to say your only avenue towards fantasy championships are running back, running back, running back. I think last year the reason I won my main league was because I was savvy and picked up James Robinson before anyone else, and he was a starter for me the rest of the season. So I guess I'm a little more flexible because I know you're diehard, to the true kind of the tried and true strategy, and I don't disagree with that either because of the scarcity at the position. But I'm a little more loose, I guess, in that regard.
Well, I appreciate you oversimplifying my approach. And for it's and I'll we'll get into this later, but like the reality is for me, first of all, I want to be comfortable with my running back situation. I can't. I've seen that some of these zero RB approaches people have been posting online, and they literally give me hives
But
thinking
the
about
anchor
starting
RB
week
is
one
much
with
more like comforting, isn't it? You've
right,
seen that
right, right.
approach.
Well,
If I
and
have
with
one
that,
running back that I feel great about, I'm much more,
yeah,
able
and
to
well, and
go to gamble.
with that in mind, I mean, it's really for me, it's a running back volume situation, right? I like to have a number of guys on my bench at the very least that I feel have real upside, and so typically by about week 8 in the season, people look at my rosters and they're like, "Dude, why do you have 6 starting running backs?" That's where I want to be because I saw some of this stuff coming. So hopefully we can help you get to whatever position you want to be in for your roster construction by helping you find, talk about not only what we think here is going to be good for you at the top end of your draft, but certainly as you get later into your draft, some of these gems, some real possibilities and options to bolster and guys that'll grow as the season goes along. So let's start off. This is, if you've been following us, this is one of the very few areas that Greg and I have a very different opinion. Uh, the consensus number one running back in fantasy football this year coming into the season is Christian McCaffrey, and I'm fully on board with that. I love this man. I think he's going to have a big year. The volume is
You
intense.
love him.
The talent is there. I love him. I love me some run CMC, man. I mean, he's a Pac-12 guy. I'm all in. But but you have a different perspective here. Tell the people what you're thinking about at that number one position, but also what's your hesitation with McCaffrey.
Well, let's not get it twisted. I obviously would be excited to have Christian McCaffrey on my team, but yeah, my number one pick would be Derrick Henry. Um, so the top three, I think we have the same top three. I'm just looking here, but just in a different order. Derrick Henry, Alvin Kamara, and Christian McCaffrey. Oh no, you have Cook three, don't you?
Yeah.
And you have
So
Henry
here, but
four.
I'll lay. So my
Sorry, I'm getting
feelings
ahead of
on
myself.
you're fine. My feelings on Derrick Henry. We saw him finish RB3 last year after a legendary season, and I don't anticipate him catching a bunch of balls all of a sudden this year. And so for me, that was his ceiling. I mean, his ceiling is RB3, whereas some of these other guys, Kamara, McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, even guys we talked about, Aaron Jones, Nick Chubb, they that RB1 is a real possibility for them. I mean, especially a Kamara and Cook and McCaffrey in my mind.
But it's
So
possible for
that's kind of where
Henry
I'm going.
too. You know,
He will have to have a better season overall than he had last year, and the
he had
man rushed for over
2,027
2,000 yards.
yards, 17 rushing touchdowns
That is a
on only
special season.
31 targets in the receiving game for 19 receptions for 114 yards and zero touchdowns. Like, they're not going to change their strategy. Obviously, they added Julio Jones. So you would think, well, that might hurt Henry's stock a little bit. I'm not sure it does. And so when I look at those other two guys, McCaffrey's coming off a major injury, and Kamara is going to be on a bad team. Like, I know we've seen fantasy running backs in the past on bad teams do really good things, but Taysom Hill and
Jameis Winston.
Jameis Winston, I'm just not sure, man. Like, they're going to turn over pretty quickly as far as going from a playoff contender to, I don't know, bottom five in the league. And so he's also coming off of a minor-ish injury as well. And so I guess maybe I harp on this too much, but if there's one position that I'm really focusing on injury history for a player, it's the running back position. It's why Saquon Barkley is undraftable to me this year. I was getting into a Twitter. It wasn't an argument. It was just a back and forth that you contributed on as well, Shane, at FFB Podcast. Check us out. Give us a follow. But like, that's the one position you should care about injuries for, because those guys are in the trenches getting beat up every single play. And so I just think Henry is the most durable workhorse of these guys, and therefore, even though he might not have, to your point, as high of a ceiling as if Kamara stays healthy and just balls out this year because he's their only option, or Dalvin Cook, kind of in the same way, although he's had some injury concerns as well, or CMC, the floor is important. When you're taking someone first overall or third overall, whatever it is, in the top half of that first round, we talk about upside a lot, but floor becomes really, really important in that round, because if you like, that's what happened with me and Zeke last year. Is like, he ended up being RB8 or something like that. But that floor was lower than you wanted it to be for your RB1, your first round draft pick. And so I think Derrick Henry's floor is the highest of those guys, and that's why I'm going to take him first.
You got logic. You've got some good logic here. And so what I'll share too for listeners, the thing that I one thing I'm not worried about is other than Derrick Henry, who has been very durable the last couple of years, your running back's usually going to miss 1 or 2 weeks in a season, especially now we're going to a 17 game season. You're going to roll up an ankle. He's going to lineman's going to step on him. Something's going to happen. Um, that happens to Alvin Kamara and Dalvin Cook every year. They miss 1 or 2 games. That's and it feels like so
More
much
so
more because
Dalvin
if
Cook, but yeah.
but if you have him on your roster, it is a heartbreak to not be able to slot that guy in for that 1 or 2 weeks. And so you think back to that and you kind of uh, in your brain you kind of add more injury history than maybe there really is for those two guys. And then personally I've been following what's going on with McCaffrey. There was a lot of soft tissue stuff, and Carolina was done, and I don't think they pushed him back. So I'm not really concerned, and I don't expect much to be different in the three full games he played last year. He was by far, and that was different times throughout the season too. Is by far had the most touches per game and the most fantasy points per game at the position, and that's with Alvin Kamara having, capping off the season with a 6 touchdown performance. So there's real, but I think your point here is so we talked a little bit about Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We'll talk about him here, but last year he was going. I think I took him seventh in one of my leagues because I thought I'll gamble and challenge myself here, which is not something I
And
do
that's
normally.
Harris this year. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so you have to think about floor, and I could not have predicted that. I mean, I don't know what he finished at 15th or something like that. It was a fine year. He was an RB2, but you didn't get top 10 return, and the floor has to be there. So I think that there's a lot of different ways you can go here. The top four consensus names pretty much don't change for anybody. In average draft position, that's McCaffrey, Cook, Henry, and Kamara. We've got a little bit of a different variation on that. So have your opinion. I mean, you're going to be walking into the draft, and if you don't have a top four pick, then you're not getting these guys anyway, most of the time. But you know, that's something that you have to be really clear about. If you've got that first, second, third, fourth pick, how are these things going to fall? And if you have a choice between these two guys being left, who do you really want? Who do you trust? Who do you value the most? I love Kamara. I think the defense is going to be good enough in New Orleans to let them run the ball and kind of play a little bit of small ball to stay in games. I think Kamara, the talent's there. This is
Especially in
also why
PPR.
yeah, exactly. I think he's going to catch a bunch of balls. He's very capable of doing that. But I also love Latavius Murray. I think they have two running backs on the field a lot this year. So,
Well,
so
that's what I
Kamara's
was going to
still well in
say.
play.
That the only thing I was going to add there was like, let me phrase my injury argument another way. If I draft Derrick Henry, I'm not taking his handcuff late in the draft. But if I'm taking Kamara or McCaffrey or Cook, I probably am. So that's just speaks to what I'm talking about as far as my personal preference for focusing on guys that I think are a little more durable, therefore have the higher floor. Uh, Although I'm giving up a little bit of ceiling there, so I don't disagree with anything you've said though.
So then we've got a little bit of difference here. At five, I've got Aaron Jones. You've got Nick Chubb. How funny that is. You're a Browns fan. You've got your guy at five. I'm a Packers fan. I got my guy at five. Um, but then I've got Chubb at seven. You've got Jones at six. I mean, we're really not far apart on much of our rankings here. I was actually shocked to see you have Ezekiel Elliott at seven, which I'm high on Elliott. I think he's going to have a great year. What are you thinking?
Well, he finished as I think RB8 last year. I might be wrong on that.
It might have been 10.
Yeah, 8 or 10, that's still fine. So if Dak is healthy and the offense is clicking, the reports out of camp, and this is where it gets dangerous when we're talking about fantasy football. The beat writers are talking. Elliott's in the best shape of his life. He's got a chip on his shoulder. Um,
As listener Steph pointed out, we got listener Steph giving a shout out for her boy Zeke and wanting to know if this is a good pick this year.
listen, it depends on where you're drafting him, and so thank you for the question, listener Steph. I think he I think he has a ton of upside this year. If again Prescott is healthy, the offense has a ton of weapons that should make his job easier, especially in the red zone. So I'm fine with Elliott being at 7 for me. Um, and actually, as I'm looking at my own list, I think Chubb. I'd probably take Chubb before Dalvin Cook. I know I'm going to be crazy right now. I understand how ridiculous that is, but because last year, if you look at their points, Cook had 137 more points in a full PPR league than Chubb did. But man, I'm a homer, so I might mess around and make that. You want to have guys that you like. I've always said that. So
Yeah. Well, going back to Zeke, so he finishes. I think it was QB or RB10. That's coming off a season where he just looked worthless and lost out there. My personal belief is that as this offense fell apart and their season went to garbage, he didn't quite have.
100%. He didn't care.
He wasn't a grown man about it and lacing up his boots and getting to work.
Pollard
So
getting touches was them like saying they're taking it out on him because he didn't
yeah,
care.
yeah, Tony Pollard, by a lot of metrics, I don't know, maybe you shared this with me. A lot of metrics. There's actually what you
He's not
see
very good.
is that he's not that good. So he's not a
No,
threat to Ezekiel Elliott. And Zeke is actually somebody who's had great health track record. Last year, I think he was actually a little banged up at one point in time, but I don't think he's missed a single game due to an injury. So he's a guy that you can
he's durable.
trust. He's consistently a top five. You talk about floor. I love Zeke in this mid range of the first round. And then, where
His
you and I
offensive
both have.
line's a little bit healthier too. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that was a bad. That offensive line had a tough time last year, so I think it's going to be a better year for them. And where you and we both kind of threw in a different name here. I've got Najee Harris. I think he's going to get 350 touches in this offense, um, and volume is huge. But he's also a great pass catching back, and he's got a quarterback who can't throw it down the field and knows how to hit. Le'Veon Bell had some magnificent years. I don't know what the gap is in talent between the two of them, but I would take Le'Veon Bell light at the back end of the first round. And in that same spot at 8, you have um, Antonio Gibson from the Washington football team.
Yeah, and I will issue a correction because when I put this list together, my rankings it was about a week and a half ago before I went on vacation, and I would have Harris on this list replacing Jonathan Taylor now. I would take who was the first guy that you were comparing your Harris pick to? It wasn't Gibson.
Well, it was Gibson. So
Okay, okay.
because I don't have Gibson in my top 10.
So I'm pretty big on Gibson, especially in a full PPR league. So I think there's a lot of upside there. I think Washington's an underrated football team in general. But I would say that I would put Harris in my top 10, replacing Jonathan Taylor, because if Carson Wentz is out, we don't know what that offense is going to look like at all, and therefore his opportunities should be limited. And so I would I'd put Harris back in the mix, even though I hate the Steelers. Um, there's a lot to like there for a team with a quarterback who sucks, because Big Ben does, and they're going to run the ball a lot, and
And play
he's going to have a
defense.
right, and he's going to have a ton of opportunities. So
Yeah,
as much
I
as I
want
would
the
hate to
running.
draft him, I would do it.
I want the only talented running back on a team with the number one defense in the
Sure,
NFL. That's
sure,
I love
sure.
that idea. But
Yeah,
you touched on Jonathan Taylor here. I wasn't as sold as some people were anyway. I mean, it's a cheap take now, but with Carson Wentz going out, likely Jacob Eason, a rookie, coming in at quarterback for them for maybe half the season, if not
or
more,
Philip Rivers, maybe he'll come back.
or your boy Phillip. And one of the things I saw too. So Quentin Nelson, their All-Pro left tackle, is also has the same foot injury. This seems too weird. I don't know what these two were doing together, but same foot injury, same timetable, and I came across a statistic here when Jonathan Taylor ran to the right side. where they have not an all pro right tackle, he averaged 2 yards per carry before contact less. So think about this. He was getting 2 more yards down the field when he was running to Quentin Nelson's side last year. And now that guy's gone. And the right side's not any better. So you've got sort of two average tackles on this offensive line. Suddenly he's got a stacked box and he's up against tough odds, and this wide receiver core is not amazing. So Jonathan Taylor takes a big hit for me and drops out of my top 10,
Agree.
and he's a
He
tough
might be out of
sell.
my
I
top 15. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah, if he were to tumble, I'd be really interested in snatching him up because I think he
Sure.
could finish the year really strong if both these guys come back and they're healthy. He is going to be a featured back. But right out the gates, there's guys here that are going to contribute more for me, and a guy that I'm willing to gamble on this year. And I know you're going to have issues with this, but Joe Mixon, I think, is going to see a ton of volume every time he's on the field.
I
The
don't
kid
have
touches the
issues with
ball
that.
like crazy. But he had the weird foot thing. He's had a couple of injuries in the past. It sounds like he's getting good to go. I think this offense is going to be better. I think Joe Burrow will figure things out. And if Joe Burrow is a little iffy to start the season, that probably just means more touches for Mixon. And Gio Bernard's not there anymore to take the passing down. So I like
Well, that's
Mixon
what I
as a
was going to
top 10
say.
back this
Yeah,
year.
I agree. That's what I was going to say. Is in our last episode we touched on Burrow's kind of recovery a little bit. If he's not 100%, they're going to lean on Mixon even more. And to your point, his backup options are less now. And so I'm not, you said I would criticize it. No, I'm totally fine with Mixon there. I might, in the draft, if you're talking about, let's see, what is his overall ADP? About 20. So I wouldn't take him at 20 if I could get Calvin Ridley or Justin Jefferson, although he had an injury issue today, that we're going to see how that shakes out. Um, there's a couple guys that I would think about taking before him there overall, but I'm not out on Joe Mixon. I think he's going to be a really solid player this year.
What colored me impressed. I'm surprised, but I mean, it's the volume is huge, and he's going to have it. So, and then we both love Austin Eckler. We both have him at 10. I think we talk about floor. I think Eckler's a safe pick.
Especially
He
in
made
PPR leagues.
he
My
had the
God.
1 year. Exactly. He had the 1 year he was RB4, I think. I don't know that I'm projecting that necessarily, but because he had a little bit of durability issues toward the ends of the season last year, but I think he's very, very safe. So one guy that's missing here that we talked about, where's Saquon Barkley? Where does he fall for you? Where and we both know that neither of us are going to get him where we want him, but where is he in your rankings?
He is 17 in my rankings.
That's
Although
amazing.
actually,
And
I
this
think he's lower than that because he's probably 18. When I'm looking at my list here, I've got, and this isn't even a difficult decision for me. So the guys I have immediately before him, David Montgomery, Chris Carson, J.K. Dobbins, that's not even close for me to take one of those guys before him. And then I have Josh Jacobs after him on this initial rankings. No, I would take Josh Jacobs before Saquon 100%. That's probably where I draw the line right at about 18 right there. But the truth is I'm never going to draft him this year. It's just not going to happen.
well, I mean, let's be clear for listeners. This isn't about talent. This is not a anything about what he's capable of
Of
doing.
course, no way.
It doesn't sound. There's a possibility he's not ready for week one. I know he's coming off the pup list and he's about to
They
start
said it might be week
practicing.
3, I think.
Yeah. So, but even if he does come back, they're talking about bringing him slow. They've added a couple of more running backs to that room. And actually, I mean, remember Wayne Gallman looking fantastic in that
You love
offense
Wayne
last year without him.
Gallman.
So,
You're like,
so yeah, you've got some other guys here. I just there's no way he gets the volume. Plus, they've added Kenny Galladay, albeit a banged up Kenny Galladay already. This offense is going to have more targets, more weapons, but it's also not a great offense. And that defense has improved. And so I don't see him having these games where he's getting 100+ receiving garbage yards and 15 to 20 carries and the possibility for a couple of touchdowns every single week. I don't think the volume's going to be there, and I don't think the upside is there. And there is a real injury risk here. He has, as Greg says, he's been ouchy. multiple times. This isn't a one off for Saquon.
It's not. To me, it's not even really worth discussing because I don't think anyone listening should draft him. Period. I'll just go that far.
Especially because the auto drafter is going to take him at like 6 or something. Don't
Right.
don't get
Right.
into that. So
Right.
because yeah, he's right now he's going 6 in average draft ranking. So don't do that. We talked a bit about Zeke. One of the other guys, we can talk about him as a little bit of sleeper that came up when we were talking. We had a question from a listener about Jonathan Taylor. Do you see Marlon Mack as a threat to him personally? If you go to an offense where you need to run the ball more, I mean, I kind of mentioned this with Latavius Murray. I think you're going to see if you have a healthy Marlon Mack, who is a bit of a bulldozer running back. I think you're going to see more Marlon Mack on the field than you want to see, and he's going to take some snaps from Jonathan Taylor, primarily just because your bell cow back can't get smashed into all game every game. So I think this Carson Wentz thing means probably more Marlon Mack on the field and may actually carry enough standalone value to be interesting at one point in time this season.
I guess I don't disagree with anything you've said. I was surprised that Mac didn't go elsewhere when they drafted Taylor because they obviously had Hines as well. Um, I don't disagree with anything you've said there. I don't think he's going to be someone I'm targeting in my fantasy drafts, if that's the question. But he's a
No, but
minor
also
threat to
Marlon
Taylor,
Mack's
I
going,
suppose.
yeah, Mack's going 50 plus. So
Sure, sure.
if he's sitting around there as in the dregs of my draft, he may get on the back end of my bench.
You,
Like I said,
yeah,
lots of
yeah,
running
that's fine.
backs. But
If you're super late and
the
you have no one, you're like, I hate all these people, and you see him there, that's not a bad thing to do. So,
there's a few names that have been talked about. We spend a fair amount of time on fantasy football Twitter, which is a horrible place to be, except if
I
you're
love it. It's the best place to be at FFB
hanging out.
Podcast. Check us out.
That's right. Come on in. One of the guys that a lot of people are talking about, right? We have the Cam Akers injury. Cam Akers going to be missing the season. He was very buzzy. That offense likes to run the ball. They play strong defense. What are you doing with Darrell Henderson Jr., who is the heir apparent, but there seems to be a little bit of confidence lacking in what he can do to fill that role?
Oh, sorry, I was muted. I'm not thrilled about him. I saw some stats on fantasy football Twitter that said he's arguably, a similar running back production wise. Um, so I guess there's an argument to be made there just based on volume. But I don't. I'm not really excited about drafting Henderson, and I'm not really targeting him as far as where he's going in the draft. Where'd you say he was? RB. Um, what was it?
He's going 31.
Well, that's not
But
terrible.
that might not be the full correction yet. I think it's
I would argue
probably
he's
more
going to go higher than
realistically
that.
25.
That's what I think he's going to go higher than that, but so it depends on where he falls, I suppose. If you're in a league where he just slips a little bit, okay, mid 30s, that's fine. Again, just based on volume, but I'm not really sold on him as a talent to say, "Oh, I have to get this guy at whatever, 25, 23."
Yeah, we both have him pretty close to RB20 in our rankings, and for me that feels like a comfortable space, primarily because of the sort of offense that they run, and he is going to be the primary guy. I think their concern is durability, so he's not going to get the kind of touches that Cam Akers would have gotten, or that they previously did with Todd Gurley. But he's a good pass catcher out of the backfield. They clearly trust him. I mean, because when they were playing the hot hand game last year, he had a nice stretch there during the season. So I like him, but he's not vaulting up to where, Cam Akers was. I didn't have Akers as a top 10 back. Some people did, but I had him in the high teens. I'm not jumping overboard to get Darrell Henderson there, but I do like him. I do like the upside there in the 20s.
You're right. I do have him at 20, but let me put it this way. I have Mike Davis at 23. If I can get Mike Davis as my next round draft pick, I would much rather do that than in the previous round taking Henderson. So that's where the nuance in the rankings conversation comes into play. when we're talking about value because, yeah, okay, I'm going to rank Henderson above Mike Davis, but I think Mike Davis could be a better value in the next round or even 2 rounds later, depending on how your league shakes out. And so I'm not really that excited about Henderson.
That's the nicest thing you ever said about Mike Davis.
I like Mike Davis. Absolutely. I think you brought me aboard that train, I think.
That's right. Hop on. It's wonderful. Well, let let's do this. Let's just get into this. So let's talk about guys that are being underdrafted. Not super. I mean, this isn't going to be next like crazy level analysis, but guys that you don't think that you think are of value where you're seeing them on this list. I'll leave one of these for you that I know
I
you'll want
know
to
it.
talk
I know
about. I'm
who it
sure.
is. Chris
Um, uh,
Carson.
Chris Carson. Tell me about Chris Carson.
Well, there's not much to tell you. He's on a team that loves to run the ball, that runs the ball arguably too much, um, based upon um, letting letting Russ cook. Is that the is that the phrase?
That's it.
Um, but they'll run him into the ground, and they're going to keep doing that until he has no more to run. So yes,
Yeah,
if Chris Carson, who I think right now, let me look at the list. Man, he's low.
yeah.
Um,
He's going RB20. That is he's being
that's
drafted
really
below his
low.
floor. I mean, this
Right.
guy
100%.
consistent. I think the worst finish he's had in the last 3 years is 19,
Yeah.
and I think that year he might have missed 5 games. So
He's
he's a
had some
guy.
injury
He's a guy that
concerns. Yeah.
he's going to miss 2 or 3 games a season.
That's about
That's
it.
just
Yeah.
going to happen. Yep, but he's going to be. And last year, I think he was catching more balls than he had previously. I he doesn't have a top 10 ceiling, but his floor is so safe in the mid teens. I love him
You
here. He is
I
such a strong
disagree.
RB
I
two.
think he has a top 10 ceiling. I really do. Like right at 10. Not much above that, but I think he does have
You were
that
so
ceiling. I
confident, and
really
then you
do.
just went right there.
I'm just saying right at 10. Not he doesn't have a 1 ceiling, but I think he has
That's
a
right.
10 ceiling.
No, well, I mean, he's 12. I think has been his highest finish, and I think that 10 to 15. I would be shocked if he's not there, and
Sure.
so
Sure.
getting him at RB20 feels like
If you get Carson
criminal.
at 20, you have succeeded. You're doing a great job. And
The
so
next guy.
go
Oh,
ahead.
go ahead.
Are we taking
Well,
turns? I'm
so
sorry.
no, I don't know. I'm just dominating the conversation. This is what I do.
No, no, no.
So you mentioned Mike Davis. I think Mike Davis, he's going as RB28. There's, which I think, who they just signed? They just signed somebody terrible, but I think the backup there in Atlanta is
It was the guy from the
Quadre Allison.
Giants, right? Um,
Alf,
crap.
Alfred Morris. I don't know.
No.
But that's going to be trying to be RB2. Mike Davis is the clear RB1 on a team that has historically used their running backs well. Health has been an issue in past years. I mean, Todd Gurley was a shell of his former self, but Todd Gurley also, I think, for a while was leading the league in rushing touchdowns. So they use Baxter at the goal line, and he's a big back, Mike Davis is. And as a fill in, not even starting all of his games there in Carolina, he was RB12 last year. So for him to be going 28 in arguably a better offense with a worse defense, um, I think there's real value there, and there's risk baked into it. But I've got him ranked at 24. I think you've got him even higher than that, but he's a name I'm looking for in my draft. I think you have him at
I think
23,
I have
so
it
not that much higher.
23. So this was a really easy question when you posed it to me as we were prepping for this show. Other than Chris Carson, it's David Montgomery and it's James Robinson. Where they're being drafted right now relative to what they've accomplished, I think is a little bit silly. Um, so I don't know. I don't know how much you want me to
Well,
elaborate on that, but
no, well, part of the issue is so I think I mean I've been pretty outspoken as a guy who loves David Montgomery. I'm probably not going to own many Montgomery shares this year. I don't expect the same kind of season with some more bodies around him. But James Robinson, I think the Travis Etienne train has to slow down. I saw somebody pose. what was his proposition? Was it ETN or ETN or J.K. Dobbins? That's not a debate. It shouldn't be. He is still the RB2. I think he'll get. I think he'll have a nice year, especially in PPR formats. But this is kind of ridiculous, and I think that's depressing James Robinson's stock dramatically.
100%. Couldn't agree more. And I think, well, we're just never going to be on the same page on Montgomery, but
Oh,
I
for
have.
sure. We'll have to have a bet here. We'll figure that out. We'll see how this goes. This year goes, and I hate to say it because I like David Montgomery. I've had him on my teams for the last few years. So let me jump into one guy that's kind of a hot button topic is Chase Edmonds. Um, as the backup in Arizona, he was RB 25 last year. He's going RB 29, and he is going to be at least the 1A. James Conner looked awful last year. So while Chase Edmonds may not be full three down workhorse, this is a great high flying offense. He's a great pass catching back. I expect him to dramatically outperform this RB 29 draft spot.
Yeah, I think we disagree a little bit on this one. The guys I have in front of, I have him as my RB 35, and the guys I have in front of him are Ronald Jones, Leonard Fournette, Zach Moss, and Melvin Gordon. The Zach Moss one's a little questionable, I think maybe, um, but yeah, I think he's fine.
You
I'm not that
can't beat
excited
being
about him.
starting running back
I
on a
get
high
it. I
flying
get it.
offense. Everyone keeps sleeping. I love it.
Yeah,
And
I'm
then
gonna
the other
sleep on
guy,
that one.
a guy that I think we both love that I've got on my sort of underdrafted list is Trey Sermon. I know he's been buzzy, but ADP really hasn't reacted. He's going as
I have him
RB
ranked higher than you do.
37. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I have him at 30. But so I want if the price is right, I want Mostert and I want Sermon. They're both going to play, and in most weeks last year, when you had two good backs healthy for the 49ers, I guess more 2 years ago, really, because no one was healthy last year for the 49ers. You could play them both in a lot of these weeks, especially if Jimmy G's your guy. I think they both eat, and they're at that price. They're a really great flex play, more likely than not. And Trey Sermon, I think, is going to get plenty of touch.
I was wrong. I have him at 36. You have him at 30. So you're listen. He's an Ohio State guy. The only question I have with Sermon is the injuries. He hasn't really proven to be that durable. But if he's in a role where he's not, overutilized and is brought in the right situation, I think yeah, he has a lot of upside. There's no doubt. We saw what he did at
So
Clemson.
that's right. Give me real quick. Give me a couple. You got some overdraft guys?
Overdraft guys. Well, Barkley's the easy one. I would say Taylor now too, with the Carson Wentz situation.
Yeah,
Um, I'm starting to wonder about my ranking on J.K. Dobbins. I've got him at 14. Where's his ADP right now? Hold on one second. He's 25.
14.
What?
Well,
14
overall,
overall? Okay.
that's a no 14. He's RB 14. So same
So like
spot you've got him
I'm what
ranked.
I mean is like
That same
25th
spot
pick
we
in the
both have him
draft.
ranked. Yeah. Oh yeah.
I'm
Hmm.
starting to wonder about him. I don't know. It's kind of the same. It's the same thing with Taylor a little bit, but um, I don't know. I don't have a lot of intelligent speak on the J.K. Dobbins thing. I'm just wondering if I'm ranking him a little bit too high because again he's an Ohio State guy. I
Well,
don't know what.
I don't really understand because I mean, this is something we've seen on Twitter too with Dobbins is the debate. A lot of people, thinking that they're working too high, and Gus Edwards isn't going anywhere. But this is the number one rushing offense in the NFL. And the last several games, I had this number somewhere. I dropped it on somebody, and I felt good about it. But the last several games that Dobbins played once they deactivated Mark Ingram, Dobbins averaged something like, I don't know, north of 20 points per game, 23 points PPR or something like that. He was a full blown RB2, RB1 to finish out the season as the guy. Here's another year in this offense. He's a better pass catching back. He will be the first. He's a three down back, but they will use Gus Edwards. Maybe they alternate series. But Dobbins is going to be the guy in the game more often than not. And I mean, the opportunity is going to be there. I don't think you should second guess yourself here. We have him ranked in the exact same spot. But
Mhm.
there is a lot of people that are either all in or all out. He's very
Sure.
stigmatizing.
I'll give you two more. DeAndre Swift and Miles Sanders. I'm not. I'm not going to own any shares of Miles Sanders this year. I promise you that. And then DeAndre Swift is interesting because I think he does have talent. I just wonder how that role is going to shake out. Maybe I'm overthinking it a little bit, but I'm not really excited to own anyone on that team, to be honest with you. So, what are your thoughts on Swift? Am I overthinking this one too?
No, 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 no. I think your logic is sound. I've got him. Actually, I've got him at 17. I think there's going to be volume there. He's a three down back. I don't think he needs to leave the field. Jamal Williams is there, but I don't
Well,
know
Williams
how.
is nice. Yeah,
Yeah, but you know, I think that he's going to have value. I probably will not get him in a lot of my drafts. I don't think because there are guys around that I feel like a little more confident that Carson's going to be a top 15 back than I do DeAndre Swift. But I do think Swift's
sure,
ceiling
sure.
is higher than a lot of the guys around him. So
I'd
that's kind
rather
of my
have Josh
challenge.
Jacobs.
Yeah.
I'd
See,
rather.
so here let me springboard into Josh Jacobs. So although it looks like we're trying to pull off some sort of TikTok like special thing where we've just changed clothes and we're like in different locations, we had some technical issues. So we're going to finish up our conversation around running backs in different clothes on a different day. Greg's at work
I'm
uh,
now at work
on his break though. On his break, if
on my
anyone's
break.
listening.
That's right. In case my boss watches. Yep.
So I was just about to get on my Josh Jacobs soapbox, so I'm so glad that I still get this opportunity because as much as I love, I've had him on my teams the last 2 years. I do love me some Josh Jacobs. The one thing that terrifies me is, he had a decent finish to the year despite being not great. But he ended up with 28% of his points in just two of his games last year. And the offensive line is much worse than it was last year. The wide receiving core did not get any better unless these young guys really come alive and they're big difference makers. Um, and I think the defense might actually be a little bit better. So I don't know. I don't love him to have a better year than he did last year. So I'm really not that excited about having Josh Jacobs on any of my teams. And it is not for nothing that contract that was handed to Kenyon Drake. He will lose touches to Kenyon Drake. I don't
Is
think
it
it's a
mostly in the receiving game that he's losing those touches?
yeah. I mean, it's certainly probably the way they talk about it. It's mostly on third down, I would guess, because they just refuse to throw the ball to Josh Jacobs. I don't think that we've seen that he can't catch the ball. They just don't do it. I think
Mhm.
he's had 35 catches, 35 targets, something like that. That their number 35 has just been the same like the last 3 years or last 2 years. So um, even if he gives up 5 carries a game to Kenyon Drake, that's working into a workload that you're just basing off volume in this offense. So I don't like it. He can vanish for an entire week if the game does not go in their favor. He gets scripted out quickly, which I saw as an owner last year.
They also have the third toughest schedule as far as their opponents' projected win totals, and so I could see game scripts going. They're behind and they're throwing more, and he gets not removed from the game, but certainly his upside getting limited there. So I'm not. I don't think I'm as aggressively anti Josh Jacobs as you are this year because I would still I could still see myself drafting him. But if I'm going like anchor running back strategy, I wouldn't want him to be my second one, probably. Well, yeah, I guess it's debatable. It depends on where you take him, but I could still see myself having some shares of Jacobs this year.
But he's going ahead of DeAndre Swift, David Montgomery, Chris Carson, James
Yeah, that's crazy.
Robinson.
That's a little
I,
crazy.
I don't like it. Even Miles Gaskin, Mike Davis, most guys we talked about, you can get them later. I like I like them to be similar in their outcomes potentially. So
hmm
also they can have way more monster weeks without having big touchdown totals. which is really what
Mhm.
Jacobs has been relying on his first couple of years here. So the
And you yeah.
go ahead.
Well, you mentioned it. They traded away 3 starters on the offensive line, so it's like, what are we expecting is gonna happen here, you know?
You got to have somebody to block for you, and I don't
Mhm.
even know who these guys are they've got there. So it's gonna be it could be a tough year for him. And that offense is going to look interesting. That's one of those wait and see type situations. See who actually emerges as somebody viable on that offense there.
Yeah, he's drafted at his ceiling basically, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly it. So my next sort of guy that's being overdrafted, and I don't think this is going to be a popular take. And again, this isn't about the talent. Kareem Hunt is going right around running back 22. The fact of the matter is it's those early weeks. And granted, I will be the first to admit that if Chubb goes down, Kareem Hunt can be a league winner. He is supremely talented. But what we saw towards the end of the season, those last 6 games of the year, he went from 16 total touches on average to 9 total touches on average. This is including the postseason. So when they needed to win and they needed to do things, Kareem Hunt wasn't the guy. They leaned heavy on Nick Chubb. They kept him in rhythm. They kept him on the field for 3 downs. That worries me because you just got this guy in Kareem Hunt that you can stick out there when you need him, and maybe they just don't utilize him quite as much. That was the shift I saw last year, and so it worries me to draft him again ahead of guys that I do think are going to be the number one running back on okay offenses for an entire season. That's what I'm looking for at that spot.
Yeah, he was RB7 in weeks 1 through 8, and then he was RB17 in weeks 9 through 17. So I'm
But
looking
that's
at where's
I think that's including a couple of good games that kind of buoyed that up. The
sure,
last few
sure.
games of the season were I think he still got touchdowns,
You're
but
right though.
you really can't depend on those, right? You need volume to get touchdowns typically.
Yeah, I mean there's a lot of risk with Hunt, but if you can get him at the right price, he's absolutely someone I'd still be interested in for sure.
Yeah, and at this where this spot is, again, you've got guys like Chris Carson, James Robinson, Miles Gaskin, Raheem Mostert. There are RB2s around here. I want Kareem Hunt to be my flex if I can help that, or my third RB, whether or not I would actually start him at flex. That's
Well,
an
sure,
ideal outcome for
sure.
me. I want him on my team. I just don't want
Hmm.
to pay this price.
I do too.
And then the last guy I'll throw in here again. I think he's going to have a nice year, but I think we're crowning Javante Williams of Denver a little too soon because there's not a guarantee that he is your number one running back, and we've seen talented running backs in this offense split the tote. And again, he's going ahead of guys behind him that I know are going to be the number one running back in their offense that we've discussed that we like. So as much as I think Javante Williams is going to take over this backfield, taking him at RB24 again ahead
Is
of,
that where he's at right now?
yeah, I didn't expect to see that. This was kind
He's
of a
jumped a
shock.
lot. He's jumped a lot.
Yeah, and this is also an offense with 4 or 5 elite wide receivers and a big armed quarterback for now. We'll see if Teddy Bridgewater takes over there. I think that helps the running game if Bridgewater takes over that role, but
Hmm.
it's a little too rich for my blood. I wouldn't be taking him there just because it's still an unknown.
He might slide though, depending on how savvy your league is. He might drop a little bit. So I am interested in him again. It's just at what price. So to your point, if he's the 24th running back, it's that's probably a bit of a stretch. I mean, there's a ton of upside there potentially, um, but I do agree with you that there are some other guys in that space that feel more secure to me.
Yeah, he's one that the buzz has pushed him above my
Yes,
comfort level.
yes.
I think at one point in time we were seeing him somewhere around RB 35,
Oh, he was low. Yeah.
and that's where we thought it was a real value.
Hmm. Hmm.
But you'll that if he's
I think I
sitting
took him
around
at
there in
the
your
end of our
draft,
mock draft in that episode, like at the very end.
yeah, that was yeah. So
Yeah.
we were that was pick 100, right? That was like 35
Sure.
picks later than
Sure.
he's going on average.
Yep.
So yeah, you'll have to have incredible conviction to take him where he's being drafted right now, I think, and
Hmm.
maybe you're right. And but if you're wrong, you don't really have
Yeah,
a very usable asset on your roster for several weeks.
you're right. I agree.
So those are my biggest gripes. That's what I had to get off my chest. Some of these guys again. I think with the running back game, there's a ton of talent out right now in the league. It's just about making sure that you're getting them that they are going to have the opportunity first of all, and that you're getting them at a price that you think you can that actually gives you value. I think if you can combine those two things, you're making a smart pick at running back.
Sure, sure. Well, is that all you wanted to cover today, my friend?
I think so.
Because we were, let's see. I mean, we talked about. I don't know if you wanted to mention like who are the dart throws that you're throwing at the last one or two rounds of the draft.
Well, I mean, one of them was going to be Michael Carter, but he's a name too of the
He's
New York
gone up too.
Jets. He's gone up quite a bit, and so he's sitting at that RB 34. I still don't really necessarily dislike that spot, but there are better known quantities in that area or guys that I think that are in offenses that are likely to have better rushing years. But he could be a big deal. Sounds like he's the most talented back there in New York. This is an offense that is springing off of what the 49ers do with a big armed quarterback. It could be a real recipe for success. Again, this is sort of Cam Akers last year, right?
Hmm.
We knew that there was talent. We knew he was coming into an offense that likely could figure out how to make the most of a running back. We just didn't know what his deal was, and it did take him 10 weeks or so to become a guy. So Michael Carter, if you can stash him at the end, I'm interested.
Yeah, some other ones that I'd be looking at. I mean, Gus Edwards. I don't know where his ADP is right now,
I think
but
he's just outside of 40, so at
okay.
45 ish.
So that's someone I'd be looking at. Actually, we haven't really talked about the Texans at all. Why should we? But Philip Lindsay could be a sleeper there too. And then your guy Jamal Williams in Detroit.
So I would say it more than Jamal Williams because of what we talked about with Detroit. For me, is AJ Dillon. I don't
Yep,
think AJ
yep. I was
Dillon
going to ask.
with Green Bay is as talented as a pass catcher. I mean, he's younger. That wasn't his strong suit, but I mean, we've seen for years Jamal Williams be able to be a flex asset in a pinch, but he's also an elite handcuff in a game, a team that will use that running back. I mean, the one game that AJ Dillon got the start, I think he had I don't know 100.
21 for 124 and two touchdowns.
There it is. So
Yeah, that's week
it's
16
I like that you had it
against a
up,
good
but
defense.
I
Yeah,
want to imagine that for some reason it's just burned into your brain.
yeah.
Like it just
That's
rattled
from
it off.
memory. Tony Pollard is another dart throw I would take at the end. We talked about Trey Sermon. Um, I think that's all the ones that I was going to mention as far as some of the dart
Well,
throws.
and real quick, I mean, let's touch on this again. We've talked a bit about handcuffs.
Hmm.
Um, for a long time, Greg had been a proponent of handcuffs. I think he's a little on the fence now. I'll let you talk about it. I don't really believe in handcuffs unless you have genuine concern. A name that
Hmm.
actually I thought he was within these numbers. Latavius Murray, I think, is a value pick because he's going outside of the top 40 running backs.
Sure,
And I think he is going to have standalone value in an offense that, like I said, I think they're going to play strong defense in New Orleans. And I think they're going to try and run the offense through their running backs. And that can't just be Alvin Kamara. He will break in
sure.
half at some point in time.
Yeah, I have changed my tune over the years. I used to be pretty adamant about wanting to have a handcuff for my top one or two guys, but nope, I'm not on that train anymore. But to your point, if there's a guy with standalone value like Kareem Hunt or Latavius Murray, and you happen to have the other guy, okay, that's fine. I don't love it, but um, it depends on the situation. But yeah, I'm not really on that train anymore.
Well, and again, I don't think this is going to be a popular take, but so thinking about the difference between where you can get Latavius Murray versus what the draft value you're giving up for Kareem Hunt,
Sure.
they're not the same guy, but for most of your season, they could very well occupy the same role on your team where you're not sure if you're going to start them that week. Is this a week that that their team is going to run all over? Are they playing the Houston Texans? Then Kareem Hunt's in your lineup and Latavius Murray's probably in your lineup. But,
Hmm.
60, 70 spots later, that's almost 7 rounds later is where you're getting
Sure.
Latavius Murray than Kareem Hunt. So think about how you're going to utilize these guys too. What will they mean for your team? And that's kind of how you want to utilize your draft capital.
Yeah, I agree. Just don't be me. Don't be me who had Zeke last year in one of my teams, and then Tony Pollard just sucked up a roster spot. the whole year, and I was too stubborn to drop him, and that was a really stupid thing to do. So don't be like Greg.
But it is funny because you hear, I mean, people that we truly respect in this business will tell you, of course, you've got to have, if you've got Dalvin Cook, you've got to have Alexander Madison. That is not. I have not lost a league because I didn't have my guy's handcuff. You know, the one year that you
Hmm.
drafted Le'Veon Bell, would you have loved to have had James Conner in your draft? Sure, you
Well,
would have, but you
sure.
also didn't think Lev Bell was not going to show up to play football. So,
Right. And Madison was available on waivers for 90% of the season last year.
and he
So,
bombed when he got the chance anyway. So,
exactly. And he screwed it up when he started. And so it's just not worth it. There are the couple guys we mentioned, like Murray and Hunt, are going to get drafted. But for the most part, your handcuff is going to be available as a free agent. So if you're keeping an eye on the waivers and maybe you read a report from practice or something that someone's limited, okay, you'll have the jump on picking that person up. But it's not worth just taking up a roster spot for the sake of it. So
right, especially in our previous show we talked about the potential for either young or quarterbacks that have stepped into new and better situations. I'd much rather
mhm.
roster one of those guys than a handcuff
Yeah, for sure.
because they could be a lottery ticket. So I think what maybe we've confused the people enough. Hopefully, hopefully this added
Let's
some
change
clarity
scenes
to.
again.
That's it. That's it. Just the
I'm
jumping.
like I Dream of Jeannie or something.
I don't. How old are we?
I know. I was That's a terrible
It's
reference.
like a nose wiggle. I can't wiggle my nose. Anyway, Greg, will you share some social media information with these people and get us out of here?
Yeah, just remember to follow us on Twitter at FFB Podcast. Our YouTube channel link is on there. It was broken last time we tried, but I'll make sure we fix that because now, as you can see, we are streaming these episodes on video. And so if you have interest in staring at our faces for an hour instead of listening to our voices, check out our YouTube channel. I think it's going to blow up. I just know it.
Well, and make sure on your wherever you're getting your podcasts, you like or subscribe. But do come to Twitter and send us a message. We'd love to hear from you, hear who you are, you people there. I think the last time I looked, we had 17 different states had downloaded episodes over the last month. People are
That's
listening
great.
all over the place, and we want to hear from you. And if you think our takes are crap, or if you have questions, or you just want to show some love, which we desperately need,
Yes,
come on out.
we do. I do like the listener questions that we've had thus far, so keep them up. Always good to hear from you.
All right. Well, we will be back shortly with a wide receiver episode, a tight end episode, and then our spicy big takes episode. Let's get you ready for really get you ready for the draft and for the season. Until then, adios, my friends.
Adios.